program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome into Transformative Freedom, everyone. I am your host, Sara Higdon. We got a great guest today, but first I have a little ad. A little relief from rising gas prices. Get cash back on each fill up using the Get Upside app. Download the app on your phone using the link in the description and get an extra 20 cents off per gallon back on your first tank using promo code AFF20. The app also offers cash back at select restaurants and grocery stores. As well, y'all, your girl is speaking at Freedom Fest this year. They are running a special of when you buy your tickets, go into and type friends 50 and you'll get $50 off your tickets. So it's going to be a great event out in Vegas at the Mirage. So my guest today is editor-in-chief of the Post Millennial, Libby Emmons. Welcome in.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were both on Deprogrammed with Carrie Smith, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned something that really stuck in my head when talking about like the current culture war and why we're seeing so much stuff happen. And it was kind of that set the stage for this discussion. And you said part of the issue we are seeing is that we have removed rites of passages to signify adulthood. You want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So this is something that I was exploring a couple of years ago. I was doing I was teaching a confirmation class at my church, which in the Catholic Church, when you're about 13. Wait, hold on one second. Dude. Thank you. My son is playing loud video games with his friends.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago, I started teaching the catechism class at my church, which is you prepare basically for 7th and 8th grade, do a lot of Bible study and prayer and things like that to prepare to take your confirmation. And you take on a new name. You usually take on a saint name that you identify with and whose story that you like. And you accept essentially the role of adulthood in your church. And you say, prior to this moment, my parents were responsible for making sure that I grew up in faith. And now I am taking on that role myself. So your parents drag you to church prior to that. And after your confirmation, the idea is that now you're going to church and pursuing the sacraments of your own volition. You're an adult in the eyes of the church. In the Jewish faith, you take your bar mitzvah, your bat mitzvah when you're 13. Again, you do a lot of Bible study, you read the Torah, and you take on your role as an adult in Judaism. When you're about 13, in a lot of Native American cultures, you get sent out into the woods to pursue adulthood, to take on this role, to become an adult in your community. Maori tribes, the Maasai in Africa, there's a lot of cultures globally that around the age of 13 recognize this moment that you come into adulthood, that you're beginning, basically you're saying, I'm no longer a child, I'm going to be an adult, I'm working toward adult responsibility. In the US at this point, we don't really have that. We've taken faith away to a large degree. Christianity is in a lot of ways very frowned upon. It's not something that culturally we pursue. We don't really pursue it as a society. And that's true for a lot of religions, It's just not the part of our cultural landscape in the same way that it was. And it's certainly not an assumed part of our social structure at this point. So what I started noticing was that all of these faiths, all of these communities globally have this rite of passage at about the same time. And this is also when so many kids start coming out, expressing publicly their intentions for sexual orientation or gender identity exploration or things like this. And it does feel very much like this is a kind of rite of passage. I'm seeing it. Yeah. And so that's sort of where I started to get that idea, was that we have replaced our religious traditions with a new religious tradition, so much so that gender in a lot of ways has replaced the concept of the soul. We used to have this idea that our soul was like this innate part of us that was never going to change, that was part of God, this idea. And now we have the idea that gender is innate. Gender is in fact so innate, we now believe that it can be completely contradictory to your body. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I had never really heard it put in those ways, because before that discussion, I would have said that I thought those rites of passages were kind of silly, even as growing up myself, but I mean, I never did. I mean, a lot of people in my area, I guess we didn't do like the Sweet 16 parties and stuff like that, which is another for people that may not be going through a religious process.
Sure.
But when you linked it to gender identity and what we're seeing in the current culture, it makes complete sense, because I've heard a lot that we've taken religion out of society, which is absolutely true. I just didn't think that those would have been what people wanted to signify adulthood. And you're right, it really has shifted over to when you come out. And I know I asked you this before we went on, and do you think, though, like some of the gatekeeping in the Christian and most faiths kind of has a little bit to play with this? Because I honestly was even told just today that because I have Catholic and transsexual in my bio on Twitter, that I can't be that. I can't be both. I can't be Christian. I can't be LGBT at the same time. So almost like we are pushing people out of faith a little bit.
Yeah, that's insane. That's of course insane. God loves you, obviously, and your relationship with God and your relationship with faith is your own, and absolutely no one should stand in the way of that. I was married for a very long time. I'm no longer, that's not my reality right now. But anyway, when I was married by a gay monk, basically, at a church in Philadelphia. Father Ben, absolutely excellent guy. And my father was concerned. My father is an evangelical Christian, and he was concerned that he would not be permitted. My whole family was upset that we were getting married in a Catholic church. It was actually like, my aunt was funny. She was like, "This is your rebellion. Your rebellion is getting married in a Catholic church in a big fluffy dress. This is your rebellion. Other people have to like run off and get tattoos, but your rebellion is getting married in a church." So my father was concerned when I told him that we were getting married in a Catholic church. And of course, his second wife was the one who made me Catholic in the first place. So I was like, this whole thing's really your fault. If you'd stayed married to Mom, we'd all be atheists right now. But anyway, so he was upset that I was getting married in the church. And he said to me, your church won't permit me to take communion, which is a sacrament in the Catholic Church, as you know.
Yep.
And I said, "Dad, I'm sure that that's insane." And he said, "Well, you should ask your priest about it." So, very like, they're going to shut me out, Lib. Like, how could you get married in a church that's going to shut me out? And so I said to Father Ben, my father's concerned that he's going to be denied communion. And Father Ben said, to deny anyone communion is an affront to the gospel. And I thought, right, this is why you're marrying us. Like, this is why you're my priest.
Exactly.
He performed commitment ceremonies. This was back in the 90s. This was before this was real, this was like accepted. He performed commitment ceremonies. He performed, last rites at a hospice where people were dying of AIDS. And this felt to me very in line with my Catholic faith. There were homeless people at my wedding, because we got married at just a regular mass. And so for even years afterwards, homeless people would come up to me and be like, "Oh, I was at your wedding," and I'd be like, "Oh, great, I'm glad. I hope you had a good day." So yeah, to me, faith has nothing to do with exclusion. It has only to do with extending grace, extending God's love to the best of our ability to the people around us, expressing that, in the best way that we can. Kindness. I believe fully that every life is an opportunity to experience God's grace, whether it's a life that's 5 minutes long or 500 years. So anyone who's told you that, I think that's total trash.
I agree.
I think they should not be Christian for shutting people out. That's not reasonable.
Exactly. And that's one of those things that I don't know if it's the vast majority of actual Christians or it's just something that the media and everything's kind of played against us. Because that's a huge issue that we see is, I always tell people that the oldest building in Atlanta is the Catholic Church that Sherman didn't burn to the ground because it was a church. And they have an outreach booth at Pride every month, or every year. So it's one of those things that normal Christians, I think, do generally accept, and they know the teachings of the Bible and everything like that. So,
well, even if someone were to disagree with your lifestyle or anybody's lifestyle, my lifestyle, that's absolutely no reason to deny sacraments or to deny grace to that person. I mean, even if you disagree with it, what's the best way? What's the best way is to include and to say, come be part of faith. Yeah, I fully believe that.
And so going back a little bit too, but do you think that has kind of been an issue in, the losing of the culture war has kind of been some of our own doing?
I think that it's interesting to talk about that. If you think back to, and again, it's the 90s, but if you think back to Newt Gingrich, right, and his whole Christian rights thing, that was a very sort of confrontational Christianity that I remember at the time I was fully opposed to. And I don't think it did Christianity a lot of favors in the United States. When I talked to my mom about it, she's an atheist, and she thinks that religion is essentially the root of all evil. And I'm like, no, it's not, but it's not God, Mom. You don't have to be interested. You don't have to find religion to be an effective means of expressing God's love for us. In order to, be cool with God. It's not God. It's, you don't have to like religion, but it's not God,
I can actually see what she was saying there too, because myself, I see the Catholic Church very much like government in a lot of ways. And I'm like, I don't know. And that's why I'm almost at the point where I'm just like, maybe I'm not Catholic. I still call myself Catholic, but I'm more just non-denominational Christian because I believe in Jesus. I believe in all that. But I just don't like the hierarchy of the church. It's too much like government and too much corruption like government. So, and it can change. The Pope can change everything.
Right. And it was a government, right? I mean, the church ruled Europe for a very long time.
That's true. That is absolutely
in a very
true.
governmental way. If it weren't for the church, banking would be very different. The church had hold on one second. Dude. Yo. All right. You're getting in my brain and making it hard for me to think. Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
He had a long day and now I'm letting him play video games. So
well, that's good. Yeah, at some point my dog will probably bark, so it's okay.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, I see it, and it's almost the same people though, the Christian right and Republicans in general. They just lost the election, and yet they're still trying to push people away because of stuff like this. And so it's how do you win? It's how do you pull people back to our side in the culture war if you're going to continue to push them out of faith?
One thing that's, I think, interesting is that a lot of liberal values have now sort of landed on the conservative side, which is how I ended up on the conservative side. Is suddenly free speech is a conservative issue. And I'm getting concerned because now I'm seeing, book banning, and I'm like, that's not how that works. It's not how you do that. But free speech is now on the conservative side. Being anti-war suddenly is conservative. Have you noticed this? This is like this
Yes.
new thing. All my conservative friends are
other than
anti-war.
neocons.
Right, but they're like establishment GOP. They're not the new right type of people.
Yeah.
And I think I'm hopeful that on the new right side, there's room for anti-war free speech Christians who are much more interested in extending ideas of grace and kindness and, fraternity, I guess, to anyone who's interested in that, as opposed to shutting people out. Yeah. That would be my hope.
I agree. So you came from the left. I always preface that because that doesn't necessarily mean you came from the left. It means the left left you is what kind of how it works, right?
Yeah, it does kind of feel that way. A lot of my positions are exactly the same as they've been for a long time. I've always been like a dedicated free speech person with no exceptions, just like totally in favor of speech. I spent a long time making theater. I was a theater artist for a long time. I studied playwriting at a master's level. And, when I was younger, when it was necessary, I marched against the war. I marched for gay rights. I mean, a whole bunch of other things. I'm pretty sure I marched against the DNC because they weren't left enough at the time for me, So I think I marched to free Mumia Abu Jamal at one point, I'm pretty sure, in Philadelphia, because I was in Philadelphia and we did that periodically. So I definitely came out of that much more liberal tradition. And I'm still very anti-war. I'm still opposed to abortion, just like I was when I was on the left, because that used to be okay, So a lot of my positions are very similar to what they were.
That's always interesting. Yeah. And see, that's even amazing, is now you can't even, again, you can't be religious and be in the left,
Right. You have to hate God or something, You have to hate everybody. You have to hate everyone who disagrees with you, which I think is just anti-liberal entirely.
Absolutely. And see, liberal means so many different things. And that's why I don't call the current left liberals. I make a point to call them progressives, because that's what they are. They are further left than liberals ever were. Liberals are still more moderates, and I think a lot of the moderate Dems, the establishment Dems, are still more liberal, but pushing further away.
I think that's right.
What's really interesting is, and I mean, I'm a registered libertarian, so, and I was the opposite. I grew up a very conservative. I was a Tea Party conservative through that whole movement. Yeah, and actually, our chair of the Georgia Libertarian Party, he likes to point out when we're sitting at a table of people that used to be left and now have become libertarians, that I am the one that came from the right, sitting at the table, being who I am. Right. It's always funny, and it always gets some questions but I think it is. I think the social issues are really what pushed me away. It was that, and fiscally, being part of the Tea Party, I wanted less intrusion. I was a constitutionalist, so I wanted less intrusion and smaller spending, like no spending. And when we put people in office, they didn't do that, and that's what pushed me away from the conservatives into the Libertarian Party. But as well, some of this pushing people away because of, who they are and who they love and everything like that. Even though at the time that was more of a bipartisan support issue.
Right.
I mean, Donald Trump was the first person that came into office supporting gay marriage. So it's really interesting how the polls are starting to shift.
He had the first gay cabinet member as well.
Yes, Richard Goodell.
Acting, director of national intelligence. And they talk about how Pete Buttigieg is, and it's just because he was forget that Trump didn't confirm anybody. It's like constantly
that is true.
Stuff around.
And they would never admit it anyways, and that's why I was sad in the race for California, because they weren't getting behind Rick Goodell, because he was running for governor of California and nobody really got behind him, even though he was serving on such a high position in a place like California, he probably would have done pretty well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't know he was running. I only knew about what's his name, Larry Elder. I didn't even know
unless
Grinnell was running.
unless he dropped out when Larry Elder announced, that might have been what happened. He announced that he was going to run, then Larry Elder ran, but he wasn't going to run against him. So that might have been what happened. I'm not sure. But
yeah, I'm not affiliated really with any political party at this point. I feel like I'm here and everybody's going to go this way or that way, and I'm still just going to be here, you know?
But don't you, I mean, you probably get called all sorts of names by the left, though, because being the editor-in-chief of Post Millennial, which is seen as this, you know, to them it's seen as a Nazi newspaper, right?
Is it? It's really seen as a Nazi newspaper? I just work constantly. I don't know how we're perceived. We go to conferences and, you know, me and my team, and we'll go check stuff out. We'll go to CPAC or whatever, and people are like, oh, I love the Post Millennial. I'm always like, yay. People read us, you know, because I love my job. I love my crew. So,
yeah. I actually love, I love your stuff too, but it's like, it's very like, because it's so independent and it just tells the truth, that you guys tell stories that other organizations aren't, you know, putting out there. And so when you guys do that and you guys, and you share a link, like somebody's like, oh, what's your evidence? And I post one of your articles. It's very much dismissed because it's this right-wing, you know, alt-right newspaper.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely tell you, we're not alt-right. Most of us are former liberals, honestly.
That's what I mean.
If you look at our backgrounds, a lot of us come out of the arts, you know, and here we are. We were left by the left. We continue to state what we see, you know, as honestly as we can. We've been tracking culture wars. That's been a huge part of, I think, our identity as an outlet. We see ourselves as a news and culture outlet. We see ourselves as center right. And I'm pretty happy with that. You know, we state clearly like we're center right. We're not saying that we're an objective wire service, for example. We're not saying that. You know, we're clear about what we're doing and what we're about. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, there's been name calling. There's been, you know, your random threats from anonymous Twitter accounts and things, and it's like meh.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do with that? You know, like I'm way too busy to deal with worrying about what other people think of me.
Yeah, I always tell people, if I worried about what other people thought of me, I wouldn't be able to do this job, because the comment sections are just crazy sometimes. You know?
Right? Yeah, who cares? Like, you got to do your thing, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of times people who say stuff, it's like, go get your own platform. Go do a thing. Go say it. Go say it loud if you want. You know, that's fine.
Yeah.
When I was in theater, there's always this thing when you're a playwright, you do like playwriting workshops. And inevitably you end up in some playwriting workshop, you bring your play in, you have actors, everybody reads it and talks about the play. And inevitably there's someone who's giving you, you know, feedback, and you're just like, that's not my play. That's the play you want to write or want me to write, but that's your thing. That's not my thing. I feel that way a lot of times about the comments, like, oh, that's the podcast you want to do. That's not that's the article you want to write. That's not what I'm writing. You go do that, you know.
Exactly.
I had someone reach out to me. Yeah, I had someone reach out to me months ago about they pitched a story to me. And they were like, you should do this story. And I was like, that's not a story for me, but you go ahead and do it if you want to do it. And they were like all pissed off at me, as though I wasn't doing my job. And I'm like, I get so many tips all the time. I take some. I mostly don't take any. I have stuff that I'm pursuing. You know, that's just how that goes.
Yeah,
but sure,
that's what I do.
There's enough platform for everybody, right? Like there's plenty of platform out there.
I mean, if I have something that comes to mind, I actually write an article and submit it, you know?
Right.
And so it's like why am I don't understand. I don't get that. Like, you should write this. Like, why don't you write it if you want to put it out there, you know? Put your name on it if you want, because you're the one that's going to take the criticism if they don't like it, right?
I'm interested in your take on something. So you're in Atlanta.
Yep.
The NCAA women's swimming is in Atlanta right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Lia Thomas just won the freestyle 500.
Yep. I just saw that. I absolutely cannot stand Lia Thomas.
Really?
Yeah, I can't stand her. I already had it in the queue.
Oh, that's us.
That's you.
Wait, can you scroll down? Is that the story I was trying to look at right before we?
Is
Oh, that
it?
was the prelim. No, I wrote that one too. Yeah, I wrote that one
Yeah.
today. Hannah Nightingale was just working on one about a swimmer who was actually spoke out, which is fascinating, without being anonymous. Which is wild.
So which I absolutely love. I can't stand I can't stand Lia Thomas in general. Just her smugness and attitude and everything really just gets me. And I am probably going to do a reaction video with this on this tomorrow as well.
Oh, I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, because I did a reaction video about her when she broke the records, and it absolutely I don't like it because I'm a former athlete, and I still know that I have an advantage every time I step in the gym. I can feel it. I mean, I can see it on a spin bike. I've asked people that have been doing spin for years. I've been doing it for a year, and I just come in and completely like my times would put me in the 80th percentile among women. I'm like, this wouldn't be fair. I've only been training for a year on this, and some people have been doing this their whole lives.
Right.
And then her, like I said, her whole attitude, like there was the trip that they went to Florida where they were told not to wear their gear because of her, and she was wearing UPenn stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And then what really pisses me off, and I did a spot talking about this on one of Ariel Scarcella's videos like 2 weeks ago, because in the locker room she is showing her junk, and that is absolutely insane to me. Like that shows me that gives me doubts of her, even her having gender dysphoria, because in that lack of respect, I called her a self-righteous asshole in the video, because that is not something that you do, especially if you want to be accepted by women.
I've been wondering, like, I've been sort of having this crazy idea that like maybe what Thomas is doing is intentionally exposing this whole thing. Like 6 foot tall, extremely gifted in the pool on the women's side anyway, after placing in the 400s on the men's side, fully intact, which I think is totally fine to be fully intact, but it's like there hasn't been this extra weird thing made, this like extra effort made or whatever. And it's sort of fascinating because it's just so obvious. You can even see Linda Blade, who's a coach as well, was talking about it today. I think it was Linda Blade talking about how you can see, you can't see Thomas kicking, right? Thomas is in the pool, legs are under the water. Women swimmers bounce up to the top a little more. You can see their feet come out of the water. They've got that extra resistance when they're kicking. Thomas's feet are under the water. It just is it's almost like so much more apparent in swimming somehow than it was in, I think, basketball on the North Carolina team a couple years ago. It's just like, it's wild. It's just wild to see that.
Yeah, it is. Well, what's interesting is short-term swimming is a lot different. But long-term swimming, like ultra marathons and stuff, when it comes to ultra like that, I guess actually women have faster times than men. It's the only sport that women outperform men because of the buoyancy, and they can move through the water at long distances for longer periods of time, I guess, because men sink in the water because they're
they have more bone density.
Yeah, but obviously short-term swimming is all more about power and muscle, so that's why you see it. And so this is what's interesting is I know who you're talking about, Coach Blade. I follow her as well, and she and then so because I've done so much stuff on Lia Thomas, I was talking about it for most of this year when I was on like Chrissy Mayer's podcast. I think I called her. I think I said she looks like Michael Phelps in a one piece when I was on with Siraj Hashmi and Habibi Bros.
Okay. That is funny. Yeah.
And so, but I'll tell you, where was I going with that? Oh, because it pops up and it says that the average times between men and women is 11%. There's 11% reduction in performance between men and women. Lia Thomas lost 2.3% of her performance, which is why she went from being ranked number almost 500 to number one. Because and that if that doesn't show an advantage in sports, I don't know what does.
Right.
And at the same time, it is. I said on Chrissy Mayer, the only way that this is going to change is if the swimmers take a stand, which they would be brave to do. But
well, that's interesting because no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's what Beth Seltzer was saying of Save Women's Sports, and she was out there today protesting with Posey Parker and other women as well, talking about how this is just unfair. And she's saying that women athletes need to just sit down. And we were talking about this the other day in New York. We were talking on a panel, and I was wondering if anyone would really care if women stopped playing sports. You know, like women already don't get a lot of funding. They don't get a lot of attention. There was, there's concerns about there wouldn't be Title IX if women were getting a fair shake in athletics anyway. So if women just all gave up, all that money could just go back to men's sports where everyone wants it anyway. Would anyone even care if women bowed out? It's sort of interesting too, because when you look at issues of like surrogacy, for example, which is becoming widely accepted, this idea that you can rent a woman, not just by the hour, but, for 9 whole months, you can rent her body and her reproductive system for your, for your pleasure, essentially. You want to have a child, you don't want to have to do it yourself, or you're not capable of doing it. No one really seems to care that women are being turned into these rented gestation machines and that we are manufacturing motherless children. It seems perfectly fine with the left, with progressives. It seems perfectly acceptable. They're out there, protesting Brett Kavanaugh and their Handmaid's Tale things, and they are creating the circumstances under which women and their reproductive systems will be further oppressed, and they're comfy with that. They're super chill with that. It's progressive and it's inclusive to rent women in developing nations. If you look at like Ukraine now, right? So there's all of these babies because Ukraine is a place where a lot of people go for surrogates. They go there, they buy eggs. I think it was, I forget what podcast it was, but it was several years ago. It might have been Radiolab. Anyway, they were talking about how a lot of people who are, manufacturing children go to Ukraine to get eggs because they can get cheap white eggs. That was like I think the title of the podcast was Cheap White Eggs. So you can buy cheap white eggs from Ukraine. You can buy women and rent them there. They can gestate your children and then you can send them back to, wherever it is that you live. And there's like all of these, there's dozens of surrogates in Ukraine who don't know how their babies or the other person's babies are going to get out once they have the children. And there's all these babies there that are stuck, that were supposed to get shipped off to their parents, wherever the hell their purchasers are, You can tell from my language, I'm not in favor of surrogacy. I'm hugely in favor of adoption. I think adoption is great. Yes. If you want to complete your family, there are so many lovely kids out there and you can just go love them. It wouldn't be hard to just go love these children. You can even get them from developing countries if you want. That's a thing. That's a thing too. If you're looking for that. But yeah, I think no one seems to care that women are being erased from motherhood. I don't know that anyone would care if women were erased from sport.
No
one cares that women just get pushed out of the way. And what's interesting to me about that is, and you can tell I come from the left. What's interesting to me about that isn't that what we were saying, the patriarchy was doing this whole time, suppressing women, objectifying them. And now women are not just objectified as a whole, they are objectified for their parts.
Yeah.
They are used for their parts. It's like everyone talks about the racism that was involved in, employing enslaved women to be wet nurses. And now we're taking their milk. Sure. We're taking their bodies. Surrogacy is incredibly dangerous. And, because it's when you implant another woman's egg into a womb that's not that woman's womb, I believe there's like lots of issues of rejection because it's not yours. So it's like, if you take somebody else's liver and put it in your body, you have to like worry about like transplant rejection. That's true with embryos that aren't yours. Also, that's true with eggs that aren't yours.
Is it? I would have to look that up. Is it higher though with that than it is typical miscarriage rates?
Like IVF or something? What do you mean?
So
I know that surrogacy is remarkably dangerous, and so is IVF. But IVF is your own eggs.
Oh yeah, so I mean,
your body doesn't reject your own eggs; it rejects somebody else's.
Well, yeah. So it's a little bit different because I don't think I've ever talked about this on stream. Me and my ex-wife went through IVF multiple times because her natural killer cells would reject. And that was our biggest issue trying to have kids.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes. And it's interesting you bring this up because I was just fighting on Twitter about this. And I disagree with you to a point. There is an ethical question when talking about like just people like farms, like you were talking about. And like, that's a little bit different than if you're using surrogacy here, like in the US with somebody that, and they offer to help you have a baby. I think there's a little bit different efficacy there. But also the libertarian in me says, if it's the same kind of issue, if it's consensual, what's the issue? Type thing. So that's where I kind of come with it.
What about the idea that you can sell yourself into slavery? Is that okay for libertarianism? I'm pretty sure that you're not allowed to do that in the United States. You're not allowed to say, I will be your slave and have no will of my own. But that is question. Is that something that's libertarian? Is that an acceptable position? I think to a certain extent, there are vulnerable people who should be protected. I do think that it's much more complicated than just saying like, women are vulnerable and need to be protected from X. And so as you were saying, I do think there's a big difference between like Nepalese surrogacy farms and, a volunteer situation. I'm fully opposed to commercial surrogacy. I would say that.
I can agree with commercial surrogacy would be ethically wrong. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So it's just not, and that's not the conversation we were necessarily having on Twitter because it just dives into deeper. So
right. Twitter is not really the place for death. We try.
Especially these types of conversations because when you put it into a different perspective, it makes you think about it a little bit more. And that's not the perspective that it was being put at. It was basically being a woman can rent her womb, or we can't sell organs. I'm like, but shouldn't we be able to sell our organs if we have bodily autonomy, no matter who it is? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're not allowed to sell your organs.
You're not.
I think
but it happens.
In most parts of the world, it does happen. And I think probably people, sell their babies too. And that happens, whether, even if it's not surrogacy, there's surely a rollicking black market in body parts. Like that must exist.
Absolutely. And I think, most of the time, most of the surrogacy stuff that I've heard is usually the family that's adopting the baby or whose baby it is pays all the medical bills. And that's kind of it, which is kind of the same as having your own child, just using somebody else for their womb. But you hear stories when somebody gives somebody a kidney and then they're like, hey, how much are you going to give me for it type thing, and it happens. So, and I don't know if it's wrong to say that we shouldn't be doing that. But it's just it's an interesting ethical question.
I think the concern comes where it becomes so easy to exploit, right?
Yeah.
It becomes so easy to exploit a person whose body parts or that you're buying essentially or renting.
Yeah.
And it becomes easy to be exploited, right? Because you say to yourself, well, I do have 2 kidneys. I do need $20,000. So perhaps I should do this.
Yeah.
You know, I do have a womb. I also have bills to pay. Yes, I have 2 other children. Maybe I can rent my body out in order to help those other children.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, do we protect people against exploitation? In a lot of cases, yes, we do protect them against exploitation.
Correct. Yeah, we do. I mean, because you could almost put it in the same thing as like legalizing sex work, which I would be in favor of if it's a consensual sex work. I think it reduces a lot of this. It would actually reduce a lot of the black market, you know, a lot of the crime that goes along with that. So you could almost see it the same way as sex work. That's why I would look at it.
Like something like the Nordic model. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Like, if you instead of jailing the people that are basically selling their body, it is their body and it's bodily autonomy to be able to do that. I think that, yeah, you can have regulated brothels like they have in Vegas, and it reduces a lot of that street prostitution, which also comes which also comes to gang violence and everything like that.
And a lot of violence in that. So then the question becomes with sex work, right? Like, let's say you hire a woman, or a man to engage in sex acts with you, and you pay the money. You're in the place wherever this transaction is happening, and you decide you're the buyer, right? You're the buyer. You say that there's something that you want, and the person that you already paid says that they don't want to do that thing. You hadn't discussed it previously, but it certainly isn't something that you thought was off the table. They refuse to do the thing, and you take it from them. Let's say you force them into it. Is that rape or a breach of contract? Yes. Is it rape or is it a breach of contract?
It would be both.
Really?
It would be both. Yeah.
I think you end up with interesting questions there.
That is an interesting question. I've never heard it asked that.
What are you entitled to? You know, what are you entitled to once you make this purchase? What do you get? Do you get what if you want to change the rules partway through? Then what happens?
I've never really dove too deep into that, but I would assume that the agency makes the rules, and it would be a crime if you broke them. I would think.
What if you're a free agent? What if you're a free agent? What if it's just you out there?
That's the other thing, though.
You're not managed. What if you're not unionized? Do we have a union then?
But ask it the same way. We have sugar babies and sugar daddies, and that's completely illegal. What's the difference between that and prostitution?
How legal does that get? I mean, is it legal to be in a relationship where somebody pays you for sex? I think that's prostitution. But if you're not being rented by the hour, if it's like a salaried position, maybe it's different. You know, also probably they don't, I bet they don't have a contract. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, there's so many fascinating questions when you talk about what you are entitled to sell of your body and what you're entitled to buy of others' bodies. Because also, you're allowed to sell your labor. You're allowed to go out there and work for Starbucks or whatever else.
Yeah.
But you're also allowed to unionize. So should we have surrogacy unions?
You're
not going to be in a surrogacy union for very long. You're not allowed to do that really per the agencies. You're not allowed to do that more than I think twice.
Well, yeah,
because it's highly dangerous.
I would say any of those organizations, if they wanted to unionize, they should, because that's just negotiating your rights and contracts and stuff. I mean, every organization does. It's just a collective. It's just a collective negotiations. I mean, it's very similar to what porn stars do right now, anyways.
Are there porn star unions? There ought to be, right? I guess.
I believe there's porn star unions because they make sure that everybody's tested and safe. Mm-hmm. It's very much like actors unions and stuff too. Like actors, like stuff like that, they're unionized per show, but they're part of the union all the time. But then, I mean, all those rights kick in when they're actually on shows. But
A
they're
lot of people
independent
aren't, though.
contractors.
A lot of people aren't in the union, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
shows and films that don't go by union rules, so that they can be perhaps more libertarian on set.
Yeah.
Like the COVID compliance for the acting for actors unions has been insane. Yeah. So I've seen people like, you know, not unionize their film shoot because they don't want to wear masks all day or whatever, you know?
Yeah. And we see what happened. Well, the biggest story with that is the Rust set.
Right. But that wasn't about masking. That was about being
a
complete idiot about gun safety.
Well, but yeah, it was, but they deunionized the crew, and that's kind of led to some of the safety issues on set because of it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a disaster. That's such a disaster. You know, after years of being in theater, and like, I remember the first set that I worked on with guns, and there was no ammunition on set at all. There was no, you know, nothing. And I remember at one point I picked up a gun. I didn't have my finger anywhere near the trigger, nothing. And the armorer, who was actually one of the actors, was like, "What are you doing? You can't hold it. Stop. He like freaked out. And we had like a whole thing. And everyone was then terrified after that to hold the gun the wrong way because Polly was going to freak out at us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I live in Atlanta. I know a lot of people in the industry, and I've had some of these conversations with them as well. So it is really interesting because of what happened there, but I'm not sure. So shifting directions. This is a great segue talking about prostitution and stuff, and then moving into Florida's Don't Say Gay bill.
Oh, sure. Let's do that. I think you're not allowed to say prostitution. It's really, you know, hey, kiddos. Do you know about sex work? Don't be a swerve. That'd be really funny.
Well, but that's actually true. I think the bill does prohibit them from talking about this type of stuff.
Well, it should. It was interesting. I remember there was a question in Germany a while back. So Germany, I think there was legalized prostitution, and then people were like on the unemployment, you know, I don't know what they call it in Germany, but people were taking unemployment insurance when they were unemployed. And there was like a question, if you were on unemployment and you were offered a position doing sex work, did the government have the right to deny you unemployment if you didn't take it?
Interesting.
If prostitution is legal and you're on unemployment and you could get a job as a prostitute, then why are you taking unemployment, right? Shouldn't you just get on your back?
You know what, though?
Or your knees? I don't know. Like, take your pick.
Oh, yeah.
But we can talk about the anti-grooming bill in Florida.
Yes,
as we've been calling it. Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing, though, is I took that stance. I made a video on it and said that it was more of an anti-grooming bill because I read the bill and I pointed out some key points in it, and it doesn't say gay. It actually really doesn't even have much to do with homosexuality in general, because the stuff that you're not allowed to talk about, you're not allowed to talk about if you're straight either. So is it the Don't Say Straight Gay bill? I don't know.
Right. It's sort of the, you know, don't introduce children into a sexual lifestyle bill.
That's exactly what it is.
It's 3 pages. It's 3 pages long. And, you know, I think it's interesting because people are so mad about it that they came up with a moniker for it that is completely inaccurate. And then everyone ran a million op-eds based on that moniker. The bill is 3 pages, and it's remarkable how few people have read it's 3 pages, you know, and a bunch of the words are the same words repeated because it's legislation and you have to be super specific every time you say something, right?
And not only that, it has the same part over here as it's the same thing. It's the same content. It's just in different stuff, you know. So it's not even that long.
No, it's really not that long.
It's probably like 3 paragraphs, honestly. When you actually look at it, it's like that. The main meat of it's like 3 paragraphs. It's not. But you're right. Nobody's read it. You're like, did you read it? Block.
Nobody's read it. Or like all the people who just start saying like what was it? Who was it? Stupid Mark Hamill. And I love Star Trek. I mean, Star Wars. I love Star Trek
Wow.
too, but like I love Star Wars. And
I
it's
do
so
too.
like,
So
yeah, it's like when you watch, I hate hearing what actors think. You know, I'm always kind of like, just don't say what you think, because just don't say what you think. I don't want to know what you think. I just want to see, you know, you carry a blaster around. I don't need to know what you think.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So he wrote like gay a million times, and it was, you know, divergent and controversial, you know, even though
yeah,
the bill doesn't say anything about what adults can do or say in their own lives, and nor should it. So this
yeah,
bill I thought was really interesting, because what it basically says is that teachers cannot introduce these ideas unless it's age appropriate, and they definitely can't do it before third grade.
yeah,
Um, I'm a parent. I have one child. Um, I talked to him about, he asked me where babies come from when he was like, I think 4 years old. And I've long had a policy of just being as honest as I can be with the child, so that he trusts me and knows that I'm
yeah,
not going to tell him lies, right? So you say things in age appropriate ways. Well, here's how, you know, when a mom and dad really love each other and they decide that they want to have children, you know, and like we went through,
yeah,
um, there are age appropriate ways to talk about these things, and they are not the purview of teachers in public schools.
yep,
It's just not what the school is there for. This is what parents need to be doing. Parents need to talk to their kids about sex. Parents need to talk to their kids about their bodies, about trusting their bodies, about, you know, listening to their own impulses, like all of this stuff. This is the
yeah,
purview of parents. And I think that what the Florida legislature did is they said children belong to parents. Children are not the property
yeah,
of the state. It is not up to the state to give children a moral foundation at all. It is not up to the state to tell children, you know, what their sexual lifestyle should be about, or what the options are for sexual lifestyles. That's not for teachers to do. And I think that's a good thing.
I
Um,
did agree.
I'm comfortable with it. The amount of weird shit that my kid comes home with from public school is a lot. And I'll be like, actually, let's talk about that. Let's reconsider it. You know, let me give you the real information about this stuff. And it, you know, that matters. Not every parent is going to do that. Not every parent is going to give kids the information they need in the first place.
Yeah,
But it's certainly not up to the state to determine what children should know about that, especially in lower grades. At a certain point,
yeah,
yes, we need sex ed. Obviously, children need to know that stuff at a certain point, and that needs to be, this is how your body works. This is how reproductive
yeah.
systems work. It doesn't need to include things about pleasure.
It's
It
a
doesn't need to
it's a
include
biology
things about,
class.
right. It's a biology class. It's a biology class.
Yeah, you're right. It
Um,
doesn't need to include that stuff,
yeah.
like the how, the who, what's in. And my sex ed class wasn't like, it wasn't like what you would typically see in like movies and stuff like that. No, it was. It was
Mm-hmm.
just, this is your body. I don't even remember
This
it
is
that
how
much,
it
but I
works.
just know we
Yeah.
didn't do any of that weird stuff.
I remember being totally traumatized by my sex ed class. I think it was in fifth grade. I was traumatized by it. They
Yeah.
divided up the boys and the girls. And then I went home and I asked my stepmom about everything, and she was forthright and direct.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
But this goes back to what we were talking about with religion and with morality, right? I think that we do need to have a foundation, and the further we move away from Christian values as a default, I think the worse off our kids will be, because they're going to search for meaning. They're going
Yeah.
to wonder what their purpose is in life. They're going to wonder what it is that's inside of them that is making them yearn or desire, or feel a higher power. They're going to wonder what that is. And if we say that it's gender, which, our feminist mothers would have told us is a social construct, and now we are saying gender is innate, gender is something unchangeable, immutable, but biological sex apparently is changeable. We've reversed this. Instead
Yeah.
of saying to kids, your body is great, you're beautiful how you are, express yourself how you see fit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
You
and
know,
part of it, especially when it comes to like this, it's not only do we remove religion, we've created schools, and the schools are now thinking that they are the moral standing to
correct.
teach basically their religion onto kids. They're teaching postmodernism,
Hmm.
to kids, and that's what's causing a lot of this too. Um, it's putting ideas into their head that that you can do this and this is, and so it's almost forcing kids, even if their parents are religious, to step away from the faith because these types of things don't align with the faith. So it's like
Well,
on
and that happened
double
in
time.
Florida. There was a
Yeah.
case in Florida where a girl was socially transitioning at school. And it was only after she'd tried to kill herself that her parents became aware of this. And it turned out that the teachers had told her not to talk to her parents about this because her parents were Catholic and wouldn't understand and wouldn't love her. And when the dad found out about this, he was like, "Yeah, we're Catholic. We love our kids. What are you talking about? You completely misunderstood my religion."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think it was Clay County, and
This
there's
is
been
the
a lot
article.
of yeah, there's been a lot of circumstances, a lot of cases where schools have gone along with gender transition, social gender transition for kids, not told the parents about it, kept it secret from the parents, driving a wedge into families, driving a wedge
Yeah.
between parents and kids. And I've talked to so many moms who have dealt with this and are trying desperately to regain the relationship they had with their children. And a lot of it is that they have now spent 2 years having the school keep secrets about their children's mental and physical health from them.
And that's insane
Years.
to me.
Right.
Yeah, and I before I even saw this article, and I mean you've been reading my mind all day, right? Because I actually had the article ready to go. That's why I was kind of moving into that direction. But that's I saw this a few weeks ago when it was that I made a video on this. It was the transition closet where you wear your
Right.
stuff to school, your regular clothes to school, and then change when you get to school. And
Right.
that's actually, I said this in the video. I said parents need to know, if anything, to get them mental health counseling because they're obviously going through something. Whether so they need, their job is to get them the mental health care that they need, and the school is preventing that. I said in that video, I said, now, what do you think is going to happen if one of these students commits suicide and the
Right. Whose
school
fault
hit
is
this
that?
stuff? And I didn't know that this article was already out there. Like it had, it's already happening.
Yeah. So yeah, I talked to another mom who, her daughter was very depressed and upset, and all of these things. Decided that she was transgender. The school went along with it. Child services went along with it and took her child away from her. Shortly thereafter, her child threw herself in front of a train and killed herself. This was in California. It's absolutely devastating. What business does the school have getting in between loving parents and kids? Now, if there's signs of abuse, that's something that needs to be addressed, obviously. And this "Don't Say Gay" bill, as it were, the anti-grooming bill, is very clear that this does not replace seeing abuse and dealing with it. But the transition closet reminds me very much of when I was in middle school and high school. I went to a Catholic school for a few years, and girls would come to school without makeup on and wearing perfectly normal length skirts. And as soon as they got to school, there's a dog. As soon as they got to school, you promised, and there it is. As soon as the girls would get to school, they would put on makeup in the bathroom. They would they would roll up their skirts so that they were wearing mini skirts. And by the logic of the transition closet should be providing, slutty clothes to middle schoolers and makeup and like helping them figure out how to like really wrench down their shirts. This is what should be going on. Like, why are we only doing this for trans kids? Why aren't we doing this for slutty straight kids who want to be slutty? I'm being facetious. I'm messing around.
Yes.
But why aren't we facilitating revealing clothes for girls who really feel that they need to be extra femme, you know,
Yeah.
where are the insurance companies funding, you know, butt lifts and collagen implants and breast augmentation for 15-year-old girls who really want to look more womanly, right? Like, where's the
Yeah.
femgenderization surgery for these kids? Why aren't they getting all of this, you know?
Yeah. Now,
Where
that's
are the
what I
stiletto
kind of,
heels in the transition closet for the girls who really want to shake it? You know what
that's
I'm
a good
saying? Like, come
question.
on.
I agree.
Mhm.
100% agree. Like,
Yeah,
now that is
go
one of the
for it.
things when it comes to the trans surgery debate is there's been stories, and I completely disagree with this type of stuff too, but it's like there's been stories in the past where uh, girls would get, you know, breast implants for their 16th birthday, and that's always been a
Mhm.
controversial topic, especially among like the left and stuff. And
Yeah.
now it's like now
I
they're
think that's
pushing
super
this
weird
the
too. I
opposite
think
way.
that's super weird because when you're 16, like, what, you don't need breast implants when you're 16 because you're not done yet.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's always just been
you're
weird.
probably gonna get more, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't personally, I didn't wear a bra until I was in college because it was just not necessary. There was like nothing going on. And personally, I was happy about that. I was like, yay, this is great. I don't have to
Yeah.
do this shit. But you're not done when you're 16. You got like plenty of room to have some natural enhancements if that's what you're looking for. Like, wait till
Yeah.
you're 25, you know?
I've
Why is
never,
that a big
yeah,
deal?
and my thing is like, I mean, over the age of 18, I don't care what you do, you're an adult, but I don't think we should be giving anybody surgery under the age of 18. Anybody.
Not elective, not
Well,
elective
elective
for sure.
surgery, yeah, not
I
elective
don't see any
surgery
reason for elective surgery. Yeah.
doesn't make sense. So
And there's a number of barbarisms that you can do. Like, there's surgery. There's surgery that you can get for your children if you're worried your children are going to be too short, where they break the legs and then piece it back together. They put the bones just a little apart, and then that
yeah,
heals. And then they do it again and again so that you're taller. You know, you can do
yeah.
that. That seems barbaric. Just be short, for God's sakes.
Well,
Just be
you know,
short. I'm okay with it. You know,
I
like,
I mean, I'm very short too. So I actually had somebody that I met on Twitter be like, "You are a lot smaller than I thought you were gonna be." When I met them, I'm like, "Well, that's thank you." But no, I was my parents thought about putting me on HGH because I was going to be in the very low percentile, which is something that they do as well. So it's like,
right.
where do we stop though? I think we've gone down the slippery slope for so long. It's like, where does it stop? Like, where
Yeah.
can we stop it? Like, you know,
Maybe just now. Maybe just stop.
infertility, you know, stopping kids from ever being able to have kids when they can't consent to this, you know.
The thing too that I find really troubling is that children are permitted to go on cross-sex hormones and have surgeries prior to having a first sexual experience. And it's as though we feel that people stop, you know, that their development stops. And so I'm, you know, I'm in my mid 40s. Uh, Things constantly change. Your body keeps changing. Um, you know, the feeling of your skin keeps changing. Things just keep changing. As my mom says, um, as soon as you're comfortable with your body, it changes. You know, so there's no
Yeah.
reason to believe that the way you feel when you're 13, and there's absolutely no reason to believe that the way you feel when you're 13 or 18 or 40 is going to stay that way forever. You're just constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you can make all kinds of decisions, but prior to having your first sexual experience, eliminating the ability to have sexual pleasure just seems like such a crime.
Yeah.
It just, I mean,
And
that just seems like so wrong, you know, like sexual pleasure, I think is one of the gifts that we get for being human. It's one of the things we get that's not bad. There's like nothing really bad about it, you know. I mean, I guess there can
yeah.
be, sure, but whatever. Getting rid of sexual pleasure for your lifetime does not seem like anything someone who had experienced it would consent to prior to
Yeah.
having it. You know, it just seems like, wait till
It's
you're an adult to
yeah.
decide to be a monk. You know, don't start when you're a kid.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a good way to put it. Because it's not even as much the surgeries because like I mean that's saw in the chat, like they are happening. We know at least for young women now. Sexual reassignment surgery is not necessarily happening on trans boys younger than 18, I don't think, but women are getting their breasts removed very young. As young as 14, they were doing them in Texas before the new law passed.
That's right.
So,
yeah, you saw Sydney Watson's video about that. It was crazy.
Yeah. And I that's insane to me. Like, it's like, why? Like, and what doesn't, and I'm a little bit biased when it comes to male to female transitions younger, because testosterone is the powerful drug. Why do you have to have surgery when it's not that so young? Why can't you wait? I think male to or female to male, you can wait as well, because testosterone will, if you go on testosterone as an adult, it will erase most of the effects that growing up female changed. Whereas it's a lot harder to shrink your size, and you get people like Lia Thomas, who's a giant.
I mean, there are giant women for sure.
Yeah.
There's very tall women that are out there. Yeah, I don't think that it's appropriate to do it to children, and I don't think that it's appropriate for teachers to let kids know that maybe their bodies are lying to them and that their fantasies are true. My son wanted to be like all kinds of crazy things, you know, like for a while he thought, what was it? He was into PJ Masks, and he thought he was that. He was like, you know, he thought he was a robot for a while.
I can't remember what it was like when I was that young. I mean, I knew when I was about 4 years old that there was something different about me. But I don't think I would have ever been able to come to this conclusion when I was a teenager. I just don't. I don't know, but it's a different time. So I just don't know if I could have processed it through, even with a therapist, to get to this point. So you realize that when you were that young, you were pretty vulnerable to what somebody told you. So if you were saying all this stuff, then they told you were trans, you would go with that.
I really did not want to have children when I was a teenager. I was for sure never going to have kids. I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to be a mom. I didn't want to be anybody's wife. I didn't want anything like that at all. And I, you know, if you had said to me when I was like 17, hey, you could take your uterus out and you can, you know, have sex without concern about pregnancy, and you can, you know, go about your life without having to ever think about having kids, I would have been like, you know, that's kind of a great idea. I'm, you know, I'm not trans, but like I could have been very easily convinced to have a surgery of that type. I fell in love. I got married. I still didn't want to have kids. I was very opposed. You know, I didn't want to have a child until I was about 33 or 34 years old. And I realized that I still didn't want to have kids, but I wasn't comfortable saying no. And now, like, it turns out that, you know, being a mom is sort of the best thing in my life. I don't know what he just knocked over, but basically, like, it's my favorite thing. You know, it's my favorite thing. Like, I love the work I'm doing and all of that stuff, but like the reason for it is to be able to provide for my son, and that's the most important thing to me. But I could have very easily have been convinced to not do it, to like not
just take the step,
just get rid of it. I remember thinking to myself, like, how wrong it was that voluntary hysterectomy was frowned upon in the medical community, which it is for straight women, very frowned upon. It's very hard to get a hysterectomy as a straight woman if you haven't had children.
I told somebody.
So why are they doing this to 17-year-old girls?
Yeah, I told somebody who was looking at doing that as well, and they were complaining about it, and they were like, they were like, she's older too, and she's like looking at getting a hysterectomy, and she said they won't do it. I'm like, just tell them that you're trans, because I have a friend that lives in California. I have a friend that lives in California who needed one, like absolutely needed one for medical reasons. She had to tell them that she was trans in order to be able for them to do it in a timely manner. That's where, and that's socialized medicine, how that's all playing out too. It's like they have to prioritize.
Yeah, and that's a mess.
Absolutely.
That's a mess.
But we are right at about an hour, just a little bit over. So where can everybody find you, Libby?
I'm at Libby Emmons on Twitter, and I'm at the Post Millennial every day.
Awesome. I love your stuff.
Oh, and I'm going to be at the Better Discourse. Wait, I'm going to be at Better Discourse with Carrie in April, April 23rd, April 23rd or 24th. Damn, I'm so bad at this.
I know. I have it written on my.
Oh, tell everybody where they can find.
No, I don't. That's the only one that I didn't pull up the ad for. I had it written down, and actually, again, you took the words out of my mouth because I was like, "Oh, and you're going to be." and you said it.
I am. It's at the end of
April 20th, April 20th,
something like that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But go to
that's right.
What is it? BetterDiscourseEvent.com.
Better Discourse. Myth-informed. They're Myth-informed MKE on Twitter. They keep talking about it. So you can find it there. Anyway, that's where I am. Other than, thank you. Here in Brooklyn. So thanks so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. And everybody, make sure you guys click that like and subscribe button. And follow me across social media platforms. Follow Libby. And we will see you guys next time.